Okay, I think I'm gonna get started. So this session is about participatory policy making, or as I like to say, like why community engagement is important in creating the code of ethics. So I'm just gonna start by introducing myself. So my name is Sajpreet Gill, and I am an intern at Cradle to Career. So I've actually been interning with Kelsey Zubke, so I don't know if you guys know her, but if you do, just to get some I guess background. So I go to the University of Minnesota Rochester, and I'm actually in my last year getting a bachelor's in health sciences. So I don't know if we want to just go around the room and quick introduce each other, or maybe just like post in the chat like your name, whatever works best.
I'm happy to kick it off. Hi, I'm Julie Keeney. I work at Winona State University, Rochester, and office pre-COVID out of both the Winona campus and the Rochester Broadway location. I work on customized training programs for businesses. Thank you.
I'm Audrey Betcher. I'm the director at the Rochester Public Library.
I'm Kathy Nathan. I'm on the Cradle to Career Leadership Table. I'm also on the Rochester School Board and with the Area Council PTSA.
Allie Good, here is just a community citizen. I've served on the Boys and Girls Club board. I had the privilege of being on the Riverside Community Advisory last year, and kind of opened my eyes to see how Rochester is changing, and how dynamic the Cradle to Career movement is in galvanizing all the different groups in the community. So it's exhilarating to see the progress that's been made. I know Audrey Betcher and Elaine Case have driven this in the early stages, but to see it starting to really blossom and produce exceptionally good things is exciting. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Acero. I'm the head of youth services at Rochester Public Library.
And hello, my name is Jolene Hansen, and I am here mostly through my Rotary connections to Cradle to Career.
Hi, I'm Nicole Andrews. I'm the school readiness coordinator for Rochester Public Schools Preschool. I sit on the board of United Way and Families First, and I am just a Rochester citizen too, so that's right.
Okay, was that, I believe that was everybody? Okay, well, it's nice to meet you all. I'm very excited to just present what I've been working on. So I already talked a little bit about who I am, so I'll just mention briefly why we started this project. So as I mentioned, I'm an intern at Cradle to Career, and I started my internship in January, and initially we were starting on this different project, but when COVID-19 hit, a lot of priorities shift, and it was hard to get people in person, so we wanted to do a project that could be done virtually, and that's kind of how we decided to focus on creating a code of ethics document for Cradle to Career. And so the code of ethics document that we're working on, it has a lot of community engagement. And so just to start off, so community engagement, it's working with people who are connected to what the project is or what we're working on. So in this case, we wanted to make sure that the code of ethics document involved students and just kids and parents, just because that's primarily who Cradle to Career works with and who they do research on. So what is a code of ethics document? So essentially a code of ethics document is just a guideline for researchers to follow when they're doing research on people. Sorry, that's a lot of research and the word research in so many sentences. Also, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to just post it on the chat. I am looking at the chat every so often. So yeah, so a code of ethics document, it's essentially a guideline for researchers. So within Cradle to Career, it's going to be a guideline for researchers who want to do research on like students, so high school or college or like elementary, and then so we did want parent input in there as well. And so why is a code of ethics document important with community engagement? So it's important because it helps ensure that we are getting diverse community input in how we do research, and it helps ensure that the code of ethics is individualized to the community where the research will actually be taking place. All right, so now I'm just gonna briefly go over how we started the process for the code of ethics document. So what we have done so far. So in like the spring, because I started in the internship in January, we sent out an initial survey. And so this initial survey, it was just sent out to community members to find out what they thought was the most important when they were being researched. And so that's why we wanted to send it out, just because we wanted to get like an understanding of the main topics that people really thought were important when research is being done. Oh, I think, okay. Does Strive Together have a code of ethics? Could you explain what Strive Together is?
It's the parent organization, like it's what Cradle to Career is a part of Strive Together, which is like the larger umbrella, correct? Okay, yeah. So
Yep,
it's the
correct.
bigger network.
Sorry, I did not know that part.
Yeah, it's a national organization. Yep.
Does that answer your question?
No, so I don't. I think Strive Together does have a code of ethics, but it would be on their national page. But I'm not sure, because I'm pretty sure Julie brought it to one of the meetings. So it would be on their national page, but I'm not 100% positive.
Okay. Yeah, I think the code of ethics that I'm working on is just for like Cradle to Career in like the Rochester area, I believe. Okay, so these are the results from the initial survey. And so I'll just mention like the top 4 results, because that's kind of what we focused our like interview on and like the code of ethics. So the top 4 responses that people said were like most important when they're being researched is making sure that their data privacy is respected, that they're able to stop participating if they choose, they know how their data is being used, and they feel like their input is valued. And so this was from the initial survey done in March. And so once we had that initial survey, we decided for the summer that we wanted to do more like in-depth interviews to get a better understanding of these like 4 broad topics. And so before we even did that, we wanted to recruit more people into the project. Just because initially there were only like 4 people in on the project, but we wanted to get more people just so we could reach more people to interview and just get a different, just get like a greater like diversity in working in the project. And so the group, after we did the recruitment, the group of people that were working on the project, it consisted of around 10 people. And so there were like 3 to 4 high school students, 2 college students, and then like the rest were like parents. And so the next process was working on just like the interview so we could get a like deeper understanding of the 4 main topics that had been picked from the survey. And so we wanted, for the interview, we wanted our target community to be like high school students, college students, and parents. And so just because of like COVID-19, but also it was the summer, so it was hard like finding people. So we decided that within the 10 people that were working in the group that we were going to try finding people to interview that were within like our own work or friend networks. And so before we even started interviewing people, we had to come up with the interview questions. And so these questions, we kind of subdivided the questions so that there would be like 2 to 3 questions regarding each topic from the initial survey. So there were like 2 to 3 questions that focused on data privacy, 2 to 3 questions about being able to stop participating, and like 2 to 3 about knowing how their data is being used, and 2 to 3 questions on feeling like their input is being valued. And then so once we figured out who we wanted to interview, we actually started doing the interviews. And so now that we've done the interviews, like the next steps are, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to theme the results that we got from the interviews. And so what is theming? So theming is you take the original text from the open-ended questions. And so with the group of people that are working on the project, each person is going to read the original text and they're kind of going to summarize the key points that they think stick out. And then at the end, everyone's going to get together just to discuss what they think the original text was saying from all these different responses. And so this is just an image of the template that we're going to be using for the theming results. So here would be like the original text, and then this is the summarized version that each group member would put. And so we also just left a room for like a quote, so something that stood out in the original text that we might want to include in like the code of ethics document. Does anyone have any questions so far or anything? Okay, I'm going to go on to the next. So why is it important to theme the results? So this is important just because we want to find like the underlying main points that were being mentioned. And so that we can use these main points to incorporate it into the code of ethics document. And so the next step would also be starting to draft the code of ethics document. And so once we have all the interviews, and once we theme all the results, we want to take the summarized version and incorporate that into the code of ethics document. So for like the interview questions, like maybe having like each subsection for each question. And we also want to work on the layout of the code of ethics document. So we want to figure out like how many pages we want it to be, like if we want to include images or if we want quotes, like how the quotes would sit on like the pages. And so one thing that we also need to keep in mind is that, so the theming was for all of the qualitative data. So these were for all of the open-ended questions from the interviews. But another aspect of the interviews was quantitative data. So there were like multiple choice questions in the interviews. And so we really just want to figure out how we want to incorporate that into the code of ethics document. Like if we want to keep the graphs that the form made, or if we need to just like change it up or anything. And so what worked well for this entire project? So one thing that we did is we created a work plan. So a work plan is initially, it's just, so we figured out what days we wanted to have meetings. And then for those days, we sat down and we discussed what the goal of that meeting would be, what we would have to do to prepare before we attend the meeting, and what we wanted the outcomes of the meeting to be. And so we took we focused one of our meetings on creating the work plan, and this worked really well just because it kept us like on schedule, and it made sure that we were just really, that we weren't like forgetting anything. And so I've included just a snippet of the work plan. So this was for our meeting on June 17th. And so it just mentioned the things that we wanted to talk about during the meeting. And then it also mentioned what we wanted done before the next meeting. And so what else worked really well was, as I like to say, like pre-planning for delays. So one thing that we incorporated into our work plan was having a flex day. So this was just a day where we had, like, we could have a meeting on this day, but we didn't plan any of like what we would talk about during this meeting. And so the main idea for that day was in case like something took longer than expected, we had time to incorporate that into our plan. And so the next thing was with like schedules, because we were doing this all virtually. One thing that worked well was just creating like doodle polls or emailing ahead of time to figure out what times worked well for everyone to meet. And this just really helped, just because in case there was a meeting that no one could make, we knew ahead of time so that we could plan to change the meeting day. And so one other thing that worked well was planning for data adjustments. So we took time in like the middle of our interviews just to do a check-in to see how the interviews were going, if there were any like confusing questions. But we also took time just to figure out the demographics of who we were interviewing. And so we found that we were interviewing more females than males. And so because we like made it a point to like kind of do a review in the middle of interviews, we were able to make sure that the data was like more balanced so that we were getting more male responses. And I thought that worked really well just because we were able to adjust. And so one other thing we did is we created an interview protocol. So what an interview protocol is, it's just essentially a script for interviewers to follow when they're giving interviews. And so this is just an image of the protocol that we used. So on this protocol, it just says, it's like a rough script that interviewers can follow when they're doing interviews. And this was really, like, it worked really well just because a lot of the people in our group were like high school students or college students who had never done interviews before. So really taking the time to just have a meeting where we focused primarily on how to interview, and just if anyone had any questions or concerns about doing the interviews, it worked really well just because then we could talk about any confusion and just offer clarity before the interviews were even started, as opposed to doing them like in the middle of interviews. And so there were also some improvements we noticed that could be done if, like, for like the next, like for like if someone wanted to do a code of ethics in their own organization. And so the first thing we noticed is that in our interviews, some of the questions that we had asked, they weren't worded that well. So I'm just shared an example of the demographics question. And so one thing we had with this is that we said, like, please share what you feel comfortable sharing. And people would say that they did feel comfortable sharing like age or gender, but then they actually wouldn't share their age or gender. And so for like the next time that we wanted to like revisit the code of ethics, that's something we would want to focus on, is just making sure the questions are worded clearly. And then the other thing is like on communication, maybe just finding out like better ways that we can communicate, just because sometimes it was hard to get email responses, or also sometimes like we switched like from Google Hangouts to Zoom just because that way we could see each other's faces when we shared screens. So just making sure that we had those details kind of figured out before we started the meetings and stuff. And then the other thing that I kind of mentioned already was technology. So for like theming, our plan is to like share a Google Doc and just have everyone work on it. But like ideally it might have been better if we could find like a whiteboard substitute. So just for like the future, just really looking at all of the all of the options that we have technologically and seeing what might be like the best fit for what we're working on. And so one other thing that we could improve on is that we had a lot of group membership variability. So we started in the summer and now we're still working on this project in the fall. So we did have some group members that had to leave because of school starting. And so one thing for like next time is just making sure that we better accommodate this in the future. So maybe sending out emails in advance to see who wants to stay in the group like during the fall. So that way if people do leave, we have time to recruit more people. And so the influence of this code of ethics document is, well, first of all, the creation of the code of ethics document. So this will help researchers this will help with like determining guidelines for researchers to follow. And it will just document how researchers at Cradle to Career will do research. And then the other thing is that the code of ethics document, it will be revisited like yearly or every 2 years. And so just kind of getting the first draft in is really nice just because it is something that will keep being revisited. And so like in the revisions, like people could like do the interviews again just to see if the themes are still the same or if they've changed. And so I think that will be really like beneficial and just interesting. And I think so this was my last slide. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
So what's the accountability to the document?
What do you mean by accountability?
How do you make sure any of the research is being done according to the code of ethics?
So that could be just make like, if anyone wants to do research, like having a copy of the code of ethics document that they have to read through before they conduct the research. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm assuming that any of the research that's happening through Cradle to Career, they kind of have to sign off on that code of ethics before they start.
Yes, that's my thinking too. I think we're still like figuring out those details too, on like how we want to have like researchers look at the code of ethics. Like, do we want them to like sign or what we want to do with that?
Is the code of ethics completed?
It is not completed. So we have all the interviews done and we're starting our first draft. So we have like all the content and then we kind of have a rough idea of the template, but we just have to put them all together now. And then I think if no one has any other questions, then you're feel free to enter into the main section and leave like the breakout room. I'll give you some time back out of your day.
Do we just hit leave room to go back to the main room? I don't use Zoom as often as I should.
Yeah, so you hit leave room and then there should be an option that says leave the breakout room.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sajaprit, I think it's great that Cradle to Career is able to have interns like you help supplement our work and also to give you the experience to work with us. Thanks for what you did. I think this is really going to have a long-lasting impact.
Yeah, I really like working on this project. It's a lot of, it's very interesting. I'm learning so many new things.
That's awesome. Thanks for everything.